When I finally hit the six-figure mark, I thought my parents would be proud. I wanted to tell them how far I'd come, how the years of late nights, missed birthdays, and takeout dinners at my desk finally paid off. I imagined my dad smiling, my mom bragging to her friends. But when they found out, that's not what happened. It started with an innocent family dinner. I'd driven home for my mom's birthday, bought her a small gold bracelet, and brought wine. My brother Dean was there too, as usual, sitting on the couch doing nothing. When I mentioned getting a bonus at work, he asked, "How much do you even make now?" I laughed it off, but my dad pressed. I didn't want to lie, so I said it, around 100,000. The room went silent. For a second, I thought maybe they were shocked or proud. But then my mom said, "So, you're rich now? You can help us more." Dean smirked and said, "You could split that with the family. It's not like you have kids or a husband." My stomach twisted. It wasn't a joke. By the next morning, my mom brought up the topic again, this time serious. She said things were tight, that it was only fair I gave back. My dad said they'd decided I should start sending them half of my income every month, until things got better. I thought I misheard him. Half. That wasn't helping. That was control. I tried explaining my bills, my rent, the student loans I was still paying off. My mom waved her hand and said, "You've always been selfish, Maya. We raised you, we deserve something back." I felt my chest tighten. All those years of helping with groceries, sending money for repairs, covering Dean's traffic fines. Apparently, none of that counted. When I refused, they turned cold. My dad told me I owed them everything. Dean joked that maybe he should just move in with me since I had so much. The next few days, I got texts saying how disappointed they were, how family sticks together. It wasn't family, it was guilt dressed up as love. I drove back to Austin with a heavy heart. I kept replaying their words in my head. I'd thought my hard work would bring us closer, but all it did was show me how conditional their love really was. They didn't care about me, they cared about what I could give them. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I stared at my computer screen, the glow reflecting off my tears. I'd worked for every cent of that money. No one had helped me through the sleepless nights or the rejection emails or the panic attacks. And now that I'd finally built something, the people I loved most wanted to tear it apart. That was the moment I realized, success means nothing when the people around you only see dollar signs. Growing up in a small town in Texas, life was never easy for me. My parents, Leonard and Patricia, were strict and old-fashioned. They always believed that family came before everything. But what they really meant was that I should sacrifice everything for them. My older brother, Dean, was their golden child. He could do no wrong, even when he dropped out of college, quit job after job, and spent most of his time drinking with friends. Whenever he failed, my parents made excuses for him. Whenever I succeeded, they found something to criticize. I learned early that if I wanted anything, I had to work for it myself. I got my first job at 16, bagging groceries after school. I saved every dollar I could, not for myself, but to help at home. My mom would call me selfish if I ever said no. When I left for college, they didn't help with tuition. They said they couldn't afford it, even though they still gave Dean money whenever he asked. I worked nights at a diner and spent my weekends tutoring kids just to stay afloat. Despite everything, I still sent money home whenever they asked. Sometimes it was for bills, sometimes for Dean's car repairs. They never said thank you. They just complained it wasn't enough, or that I was forgetting where I came from. I used to cry some nights, wondering why my love and effort were never enough to earn their approval. Still, I kept pushing forward. I told myself that once I graduated and got a good job, things would finally change. After years of hard work, I landed a position at a tech company in Austin. It was everything I had dreamed of: good pay, stability, and a chance to finally build my own life. I called my parents with the news, expecting them to be proud. My mom's response was flat. "That's nice, but don't forget to help your brother while you're out there." My dad only said, "Just remember who raised you." I swallowed my disappointment and told myself maybe they just didn't know how to show emotion. When I moved to Austin, I worked long hours and started saving properly for the first time in my life. I even thought about buying a small home one day. But deep down, I still carried the hope that my success would make them see me differently. I wanted to believe they'd finally treat me as an equal, not just the daughter who was supposed to fix everyone's problems. Every time I sent money or visited, I waited for some small sign of appreciation. It never came. Instead, they would bring up Dean, how he was trying, and how I should support him more because he's family. It hurt to realize that no matter what I achieved, I would always be the one expected to give and never the one to be cared for. That Thanksgiving started out normal, or at least as normal as it could with my family. I had taken a few days off work to drive down to my parents' house. I brought a few gifts and even bought a turkey on my way there because I knew they wouldn't bother. I tried to keep things peaceful, even though I always left those visits feeling drained. My cousin Amanda came too. She's always been nice to me, but she talks too much. Over dinner, she mentioned seeing my name pop up on LinkedIn. She laughed and said, "Maya, I saw your company's profile. Wow, that's one of those big firms, right? They must pay well." I froze for a second, pretending to smile, but it was too late. My mom looked up immediately, her fork still in her hand. Dean's eyes narrowed like he'd just found something valuable. I tried to change the subject, but the questions started coming. "What do you do there? How much do they pay?" I gave vague answers, saying I worked in software and was comfortable. Dean smirked and said, "Comfortable? That sounds like rich." My dad laughed like it was a joke, but his eyes were fixed on me, serious and calculating. That night, the atmosphere in the house changed. My parents suddenly became overly polite, asking questions about my apartment, my car, my savings. I knew that tone, the one they used before asking for something. I tried to brush it off and went to bed early, but the next morning my mom came into my room before I even got up. She sat at the edge of the bed and said, "I just don't understand why you didn't tell us you're making that much money." I was half asleep and confused. She went on, saying how she and Dad had been struggling and how Dean was trying to get back on his feet. I told her gently that I worked hard for what I earned and had bills and goals of my own. That's when she snapped. "You're being selfish, Maya. We're your family. You can't just keep all that money to yourself while we're struggling here." Later, my dad joined in. He said they'd talked it over and thought it was only fair if I sent them $50,000 a year to help everyone out. I was stunned. They were serious. I tried explaining that I couldn't just hand over half my salary, that I still had rent, student loans, and savings to think about. My dad got angry and said, "You're turning your back on your family." Dean stood by the door, arms crossed, watching. He didn't say much, but I could tell he was enjoying it. To them, my success wasn't something to celebrate. It was something to claim. That day, I realized they didn't see me as family anymore. They saw me as their bank. After that Thanksgiving visit, things got worse. I drove back to Austin hoping the argument would fade, but my phone wouldn't stop ringing. My mom called every morning, sometimes just to sigh into the phone and say, "I can't believe you've changed so much." My dad would text me about their bills and how a good daughter wouldn't let her parents struggle. I tried to be patient. I told them I could help with groceries, maybe pay for some repairs around the house. But that wasn't enough for them. When I sent a few $100s, my mom said it was an insult. She accused me of hoarding money while they suffered. My dad told me I was acting like a stranger. It hurt because I was trying to do the right thing. I wanted to support them, but not at the cost of my peace. They didn't care about that. To them, love was proven with money. Dean started joining in. He'd send long texts filled with guilt, saying things like, "You've forgotten who helped you become who you are," or, "Family shares everything, unless you think you're too good for us now." He made it sound like I owed him something. I wanted to block him, but I couldn't bring myself to. I still hoped he'd understand one day. Then they took it even further. My mom started talking to neighbors about me, twisting the story. She told them I was living rich in the city, while my family was barely surviving. Soon, I started getting calls from people I hadn't spoken to in years, saying things like, "Your parents are good people, Maya. You shouldn't abandon them." It was humiliating. They made me look like a heartless daughter when all I ever did was give. At work, it became hard to focus. My phone would buzz constantly, calls, messages, voicemails filled with guilt and anger. My mom would say things like, "We didn't raise you to be this cold." My dad would send photos of bills with captions like, "Guess you're too busy to care." Even when I ignored them, the messages kept coming. I started dreading every notification. One evening, Dean showed up at my apartment without warning. He said he just wanted to talk. I didn't let him in, but he stood at my door for half an hour, begging, then yelling, calling me selfish and ungrateful. My neighbors heard everything. After he left, I sat on the floor and cried. I couldn't understand how my own family could turn against me so easily. The more I tried to reason, the worse it got. Every kind gesture I made was met with more demands. It felt like no matter what I did, they wanted more. They didn't want help, they wanted control. And for the first time, I began to see that I was fighting a battle I couldn't win. It was a Saturday morning when I heard a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I looked through the peephole and froze. My parents were standing there, both of them, holding boxes. My heart dropped. I opened the door slowly, confused. My mom smiled like everything was normal and said, "Surprise. We thought we'd come stay with you for a while." I asked what she meant by a while, and my dad walked past me without waiting for an answer. He started setting the boxes by the couch. "Just until we get back on our feet," he said. My stomach turned. They hadn't called, texted, or asked. They just showed up. I tried to stay calm and told them I didn't have space. My apartment was small, just one bedroom and a tiny living area. My mom waved her hand and said, "We'll manage. Family makes it work." I told her I wasn't comfortable with them staying. That's when everything changed. My dad's face hardened. He said, "After everything we did for you, you're really going to say that?" They sat down like they already lived there. My mom started talking about rearranging the furniture, saying she could sleep on the couch and Dad could take my bed, until they saved up. I felt my throat tighten. I told them this wasn't going to work, that I needed them to leave. My mom acted shocked. "You're really kicking your own parents out?" she said loudly, like she wanted the neighbors to hear. Then my dad snapped. He called me ungrateful, said I had forgotten where I came from. He accused me of being selfish and heartless, throwing words that cut deep. I tried to reason, but they weren't listening. My dad went to the closet, grabbed an old box of my things, photos, school trophies, little memories, and threw them in the trash bin by the door. "If you don't care about family, you don't deserve this family's memories," he shouted. I just stood there frozen, watching him throw away my childhood like it meant nothing broke something inside me. My mom started crying, calling me cold, saying she couldn't believe I'd turned out this way. Dean wasn't there, but I could feel his influence behind their actions. It all made sense. They didn't come to see me. They came for what I could give them. After an hour of yelling and guilt, I finally asked them to leave. My dad refused, saying, "You owe us this. You wouldn't even have this apartment if it wasn't for us." I realized in that moment there was no point arguing anymore. I walked to my room, locked the door, and sat on the floor in silence. I could hear them still shouting in the living room. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Every memory I had of love from them felt fake. They didn't care about me. They cared about access to my home, my money, my peace. And for the first time in my life, I knew something inside me had completely broken. After that day, things only got worse. My parents didn't just leave quietly. They made sure to make my life miserable before they did. They told everyone in the family that I had kicked them out. Dean called me every day, cursing, threatening, and saying I'd regret everything. My mom left long voice messages, crying, saying she didn't raise me to be so cruel. It became too much. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I'd come home from work scared I'd find them waiting outside again. I knew something had to change. One evening, after another round of angry messages from Dean, I sat on my couch and made a decision. I was done. I didn't want to fight anymore. I didn't want to explain myself or beg for peace. I wanted to disappear. Quietly, completely. The next few days, I started preparing. I opened a new bank account under a different address and began moving my savings there bit by bit. I didn't want them tracing anything back to me. I also talked to my manager at work, explaining that I needed to relocate for personal reasons. I had a good record, and my job allowed remote work, so they agreed. That small yes gave me hope. At night, I started packing. Not everything, just the essentials. I sold most of my furniture online and donated clothes I didn't need. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I wanted no leaks, no last-minute guilt trips. I even planned my move for a weekday when everyone would be busy. My heart pounded every step of the way, but I kept going. When I finally turned in the keys to my apartment, I felt both nervous and relieved. I bought a one-way ticket to Oregon, a place I'd visited once for work and loved for its quiet. Before I left, I bought a new phone with a new number. Then I called my old carrier and disconnected my old one for good. The last step was the hardest, cutting off my name. I'd always been Maya Roberts, the daughter who helped, the sister who paid, the one everyone called when they needed something. That name carried too much pain. I filed to change it legally. When I signed the new papers, I didn't feel guilt, just freedom. The morning I arrived in Oregon, the air felt lighter. I rented a small furnished cottage near a lake, surrounded by pine trees and silence. No calls. No guilt. No expectations. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to wake up. I made coffee, sat by the window, and listened to the sound of the wind outside. That's when I realized I hadn't just run away. I had saved myself. And for the first time in my entire life, peace didn't feel like a dream. It felt real. When I disappeared, I knew my family wouldn't take it well, but I never imagined how far they'd go. It didn't take long before the chaos began. A week after I left, my former coworker called me on my new number, confused. She said a man named Dean had called the company, pretending to be my emergency contact. He claimed I had gone missing and demanded information about my location. My manager didn't give him anything, but I could tell they were concerned. I quickly sent an email through my lawyer, confirming I was safe and had chosen to step away from personal contact for my own well-being. A few days later, my lawyer told me my parents had filed a missing person report. They told the police I'd been acting strange before I vanished. It made me feel sick. They didn't care about me, they cared about control. The authorities reached out through my lawyer, and I gave a short written statement confirming I was alive and not in danger. I made it clear I didn't want my location shared. After that, the case was closed. But they didn't stop. Since they couldn't reach me directly, they turned to everyone around me. Old neighbors, cousins, even some college friends. They called and messaged them, saying I'd gone off the rails. My mom told people I'd lost my mind from work stress. My dad told others I'd run away with some man and didn't want anyone to know. It was humiliating, even though I wasn't there to hear it firsthand. One of my childhood friends texted me after hearing the gossip. She said my mom was telling people I was in therapy for anger issues and that I'd cut everyone off because I was ashamed. I laughed bitterly. It was unbelievable how easily they twisted everything. Instead of facing their own behavior, they painted me as the villain. Dean was the worst of them. He made fake posts online, pretending to be concerned about my disappearance, trying to get sympathy from people. I didn't respond, of course. I stayed quiet. I knew any sign of communication would pull me back into their drama. It wasn't easy, though. Some nights I lay awake wondering if disappearing had been too harsh. But then I remembered the shouting, the manipulation, the way my dad threw my childhood memories in the trash. And I knew I'd made the right choice. After a few months, their attempts slowed down. My lawyer handled everything that came my way. I stayed focused on work, keeping my circle small. Occasionally, I'd get a new email or message from an unknown number. Always them. Always some version of guilt or fake concern. I never replied. I let silence be my answer. It hurt to know my own family was spreading lies about me. But I realized something important. Their words no longer had power. They could say whatever they wanted. It didn't change the truth. I was safe, free, and finally in control of my own story. Life in Oregon felt like stepping into another world. The lake house I rented was small, but it was perfect for me. The first morning I woke up there, I sat by the window with a cup of coffee and watched the water move softly in the breeze. For the first time in years, I felt calm. No phone buzzing. No guilt-filled messages. No one demanding anything from me. Just peace. I went by my new name now, Claire Monroe. It felt strange at first, like wearing someone else's clothes, but soon it became natural. It was a fresh start, a way to leave all the noise behind. I set up my workspace by the window, where sunlight filled the room every morning. I worked quietly, meeting deadlines, taking calls, and doing what I loved without any drama hanging over my head. My job didn't just continue, it thrived. Working remotely gave me time to focus better, and I started taking on more responsibilities. My manager noticed my improvement, and within a few months, I got another promotion. This time, I didn't celebrate with anyone but myself. I bought a small plant for my desk and smiled. It felt good to succeed without needing anyone's approval. After settling in, I started therapy. At first, I didn't even know where to begin. When the therapist asked me to describe my family, I found myself crying before I could even form words. Years of emotional weight came pouring out. The guilt, the fear, the endless pressure to please everyone but myself. Week by week, I began to understand that love wasn't supposed to hurt like that. I learned what boundaries really meant. Saying no didn't make me selfish, it made me free. Slowly, I started building a new life. The town near the lake was small but friendly. I met my neighbor, a retired teacher named June, who always waved from her porch and brought me fresh muffins on weekends. There was also Noah, who ran the small bookstore in town. He'd recommend me new novels every time I visited, and we'd talk for hours about stories and life. None of them knew my past. To them, I was just Claire, quiet, kind, and independent. It was refreshing to be seen for who I was, not for what I could give. Financially, I was finally in control. Every dollar I earned stayed mine. I saved more, invested carefully, and even started a small fund for myself. Not out of fear, but for security. My money no longer carried guilt, it carried freedom. Every evening, I'd take a walk by the lake, watching the reflection of the sunset on the water. I often thought about everything I'd lost, and everything I'd gained. I had peace, privacy, and the space to breathe. For once in my life, I wasn't living to please others. I was living for me, and that felt more valuable than anything money could buy. 2 years passed quietly. By then, my life as Claire Monroe felt completely real. My days were filled with peace, work, friends, therapy, and long walks by the lake. I didn't think much about my old life anymore. It felt distant, like a story that belonged to someone else. Then one afternoon, an email arrived from an old coworker. She said someone named Dean had contacted her, asking if she could help him reach me. My chest tightened as I read his name. It had been so long since I'd heard from my brother. Curiosity made me read further. The message said Dean was desperate. His business had collapsed, and our parents were about to lose their house. He said they needed me, that I was their last hope. I sat quietly for a long time, staring at the screen. A few years ago, that message would have sent me into a panic. I would have felt guilty, afraid of being seen as heartless. But not anymore. I wasn't the same person they once controlled. I didn't owe them my peace just because they were struggling. I didn't reply. Instead, I spent the evening thinking, not with anger, but with clarity. I remembered all the times they'd used love as a weapon, turning every favor into debt, every kind act into control. I remembered the tears, the exhaustion, the way they'd thrown my childhood photos in the trash the day I finally said no. I realized that no matter how much time had passed, some things didn't need reopening. The next morning, I wrote them a letter. Not an email, not a message through someone else, but a physical letter, clear and final. I kept it short, just enough to say what needed to be said. You taught me that love was conditional. I finally learned it doesn't have to be. I wish you healing, but you won't find it in my wallet. I signed it with my new name, Claire Monroe, and mailed it without hesitation. There was no anger in my heart, only calm. It was the first and last time I ever reached out. After sending it, I sat by the lake that evening, watching the sky turn pink over the water. I felt something lift inside me, like a door closing gently behind me. I knew they might curse me, call me ungrateful, or twist the story however they pleased. But it didn't matter anymore. I had nothing left to prove. That letter wasn't written to hurt them. It was written to free me. I had spent years trying to earn love that was never real. Now, I finally understood that real love didn't demand sacrifice or guilt. It allowed peace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I whispered goodbye to the name Maya one last time. That chapter was done. The pain was over. And for the first time, I felt completely whole. Not because they forgave me, but because I no longer needed them to. Maya never went back to Texas. She never checked her old social media, never searched for their names again. She didn't need to. That part of her life had ended, and she had no desire to reopen the door. Her revenge didn't come from shouting, exposing, or fighting. It came from peace. The peace they thought she would never find without them. Every morning, she woke up to the sound of birds and the calm waves brushing against the shore. She would make her coffee, sit by the window, and look out at the lake. That view reminded her how far she had come, not just in miles, but in spirit. It was the life she built from the ruins of manipulation and guilt. The kind of life they had mocked her for dreaming about. Now it was hers alone. Her work continued to thrive. She became a respected engineer, quietly earning more than she ever had before. Yet this time, money didn't feel like a burden or a secret. It was simply a reward for her effort, something she could finally enjoy without fear of being drained by someone else's demands. She donated to causes she cared about, helped people who truly needed it, and still lived modestly. Sometimes, when she sat by the lake at sunset, her thoughts drifted back to her family. Not with anger, but with a quiet understanding. They had tried to make her believe she couldn't exist without them, that love meant obedience and money meant duty. But she had proven them wrong simply by living freely. That was her revenge, existing fully, peacefully, and beyond their reach. She no longer needed to justify herself to anyone. Her success, her happiness, her calm. All of it was built by her for her. The same people who once tried to control her now had to live with the fact that they could no longer touch her. They had lost access to her mind, her time, and her heart. Maya sometimes whispered to herself, "You disappeared to find yourself, and you did." It wasn't a boast, it was a truth she had earned through pain, courage, and patience. She didn't wish harm on her family, but she knew they would always wonder what became of her. That mystery was enough. They would never understand how peaceful her life had become, how strong she had grown in the silence they left behind. In a world where revenge often means destruction, Maya found hers in rebuilding. She didn't ruin their lives. She simply refused to let them ruin hers. She healed, she thrived, and she stayed hidden in plain sight, a living reminder that sometimes the strongest revenge isn't payback. It's vanishing so completely that those who tried to break you never find your light again. And every sunrise over that lake reminded her. Her peace was her power, and her silence was her victory.